Good morning, First Baptist Church, and welcome back as we continue to walk through the book of Amos. We're going to look at the minor prophets these next few weeks, possibly months, we'll see. But if you recall, we have studied Amos chapters 1 through 3. Last week, my family and I were going on vacation, so we did not have our normal time of Bible study, but we're back this week. We're ready to go. Amos 4 is our text for this morning. Amos 4, I will be reading from the Message version of the Bible, so if you have that version, or maybe if you'd like to download that version on your Bible app, I encourage you to do so. So we'll be reading the same text. Amos chapter 4. Amos was an 8th century prophet from the south, which is Judah. But his prophecy is toward the folks in the north, toward Israel. And so he crosses that boundary. He goes from the south to the north, and he begins to preach to the people of God. And if you remember, there's one reoccurring theme throughout this prophecy, and that's the theme of injustice. That's what we see over and over again in these prior chapters. We see injustice. First of all, Amos speaks toward the country surrounding Israel, and he says, even though you are not God's chosen people, you are still promoting injustice, and God's not going to handle that. God doesn't deal with any sort of injustice. But by the time we get to chapters 2 and 3 and 4, his focus is on Judah somewhat, but it's mainly on the northern kingdom of Israel. And he speaks against the injustice that's happening in Israel. These are people who happen to be God's chosen, and yet they're not living in that way. And so here we are at chapter 4 of Amos. Reading from the Message version. I will read the entire chapter, and then we'll be able to go back and delve deeper into it. Listen to this, you cows of Bashan, grazing on the slopes of Samaria. You women, mean to the poor, cruel to the down and out, indolent and pampered, you demand of your husbands, bring us a tall, cool drink. This is serious. I, God, have sworn by my holiness. Be well warned, judgment day is coming. They're going to rope you up and haul you off, keep the stragglers in line with cattle prods. They'll drag you through the ruined city walls, forcing you out single file, and kick you to kingdom come, God's decree. Come along to Bethel and sin, and then to Gilgal and sin some more. Bring your sacrifices for morning worship. Every third day bring your tithe. Burn your pure sacrifices, thank offerings. Speak up, announce free will offerings. That's the sort of religious show that you Israelites just love. God's decree. You know, don't you, that I am the one who emptied your pantries and cleaned out your cupboards, who left you hungry and standing in bread lines, but you never got hungry for me. You ignored me. Yes, I am the one who stopped the rains 3 months short of harvest. I'd make it rain on one village, but not on another. I'd make it rain on one field, but not on another. That one would dry up. People would stagger from village to village, craze for water and never quenching their thirst. But you never got thirsty for me. You ignored me. God's decree. I hit your crops with disease and withered your orchards and gardens. Locusts devoured your olive and fig trees, but you continued to ignore me. God's decree. I revisited you with the old Egyptian plagues, killed your choice young men and prize horses. The stink of rot in your camps was so strong that you held your noses, but you didn't notice me. You continued to ignore me. God's decree. I hit you with your earthquake and fire, left you devastated by Sodom and Gomorrah. You were like burning sticks snatched from the flames, but you never looked my way. You continued to ignore me. God's decree. All this I've done to you, Israel, and this is why I've done it. Time's up, O Israel. Prepare to meet your God. Look who's here, mountain shaper, wind maker. He laid out the whole plot before Adam. He brings everything out of nothing, like dawn out of darkness. He strides across the alpine ridges. His name is God, God of the angel armies. My favorite verse out of this entire book is verse 1 of chapter 4, just because I think it's funny. He says to the women in Israel, "You cows of Bashan, you're indolent," meaning you're lazy. You're pampered. You demand of your husbands, "Drink us tall, cool drink." You cows of Bashan. Any of you husbands out there ever referred to your wife as a cow of Bashan? If you have, please respond below and let me know how that worked out for you. My guess is it didn't work out too well. Amos here, though, he's really, really brave, and he has more courage than a lot of husbands. He says, "You cows of Bashan." We would never say that to our wives, but Amos says, "You're lazy, you're pampered, you're demanding. You see all of this injustice occurring around you. You're mean to the poor. You're cruel to the down and out. All of these people who are in need of your concern, you're not concerned about at all. You're more concerned about yourselves. You're more concerned about pampering yourselves, or at least being pampered." And so Amos says, "You cows of Bashan. You claim to be women of God, but you certainly do not act like it." In verses 4 and 5, Amos says, "You bring your sacrifices, you tithe, you burn sacrifices, you speak up, you announce free will offerings," but it's a religious show. So what he's saying is when they go to the temple to worship, it's not because they truly want to worship God and to be shaped more in the image of God. They don't care about that. They care about making a scene. That's what they care about. You remember in the Gospels when the story of the widow's mite, when the rich people come in and they have their many coins and they throw them into the offering plate, and it makes all of these noise, clinging and clanking against the offering plate, and everybody turns to look at them because it's a spectacle, really. They're showing everybody else, this is how much money they have, and then the widow comes and she gives 2 copper coins, all she has to live on. And Jesus says, "That's what I want." She gave everything she had, but the rich folk, they just gave out of their excess. And so it really, what that was, it was just a purely religious show. It was hollow worship. This is what seems to be occurring here in Amos's day to the people of God in Israel. It's just a religious show. It's hollow. They really don't mean it. They go to worship. They go to worship to be seen. They go to worship to be seen in their fancy clothes, and they come with their money and they throw it into the plate, and it makes all of these noises, and so everybody turns around and look and says, "Oh, look at how much money they have. Look at how much money they're giving to the temple." The worship is hollow. Have you ever wondered if our worship is hollow? Think about our Sunday morning service. Do we truly worship on Sunday morning for the glory of God? Do we truly worship in order to be shaped in God's image? Or do we do it to be seen? Do we do those things so people will say they're so religious and they give so much to the church and they're so faithful in their attendance and their tithing? Is it hollow? I have to think that sometimes it is. Folks, let's not be a church that is known for hollow worship. Let's be a church that is known for genuine worship, where we come and gather on Sunday mornings because we truly want to bring glory to God, and we want to be shaped in God's image. Amos says God has no toleration for hollow worship. God seeks genuine worship. Let's think about that the next time that we gather together as a church family. And then throughout the rest of this chapter, God says, "I've done all of these things. I made the rain stop. It rained on one village, it didn't rain on another. It rained on one field, it didn't rain on another. I hit your crops with disease. I revisited you with Egyptian plagues. I hit you with an earthquake." So God does all of these things in order to get their attention, because they don't seem to be paying attention. And yet over and over again we see this refrain. In verse 8, you ignored me. In verse 9, you continued to ignore me. In verse 10, you ignored me. In verse 11, you ignored me. So God does all of these things to garner their attention. And yet over and over again, the people ignore God. I've asked this before, but I think it deserves to be asked again. How are we ignoring the God in our midst? How is God at work and we just don't see it? God in Amos's day says, I want to get your attention, Israel. And I'm doing all of these things to try to get your attention, and yet you won't give me the time of day. That's why all of this injustice is being done, is because God is being ignored. God is not at the center of their lives. They're not concerned with genuine worship. They're not being concerned with being formed in God's image. They're concerned about themselves and nothing else. And God so wants to grab their attention, and yet they continue to ignore over and over again. Then at the very end, in verse 13, God said, look, I'm here. I'm the mountain shaper. I am the wind maker. I bring everything out of nothing. I'm like the dawn of darkness. I'm God, God of the angel army. So God announces himself. I've been doing all of these things. I've been trying to rattle you to garner your attention. And he says, look, I'm here in your midst. I'm the one who shapes mountains. I'm the one who creates the wind and makes the wind blow. We have to be aware that God is in our midst. How do we do that? How are we aware that God is at work? Let's slow down. Let's be more intent on listening for God, on seeing the ways that God is at work through God's people. Folks, this is how injustice reigns, is when we ignore God, when we ignore the people of God who are suffering, when we come for hollow worship instead of genuine worship. This is something for us to chew on as we continue to walk through this short book. Are we noticing God? Are we ignoring God? Is our worship genuine, or is it hollow? Let's think about these things. Just as a reminder, this Sunday will be online only, virtual on Facebook and YouTube. We also will be on WEMB 1420 AM at 11 o'clock. Worship only online this Sunday, and then hopefully by next Sunday, let's see, what Sunday is that? The 22nd, I believe that's the 22nd. Hopefully we'll be back in person. We'll be online as well, but we'll be in person starting the 22nd. And Sunday school, it is our hope, of course with Corona, you just never know. But Sunday school, we hope to start back the first Sunday morning in August, which is August 2. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. A few of you said good morning. Janie Berry. Leslie, our ministry assistant, said good morning. Brenda Kegley, Missy Farner, and Logan Engel, who is slaving away for the Lord from Myrtle Beach. Thank you, Logan, for your ministry to all of those folks on Myrtle. First Baptist Church, thank you for joining us. It has been an enriching time for me, and I hope to see you here next Tuesday morning at 10:30 a.m. as we look at chapter 5 of Amos. Have a great day.